Well, today is going to be an interesting episode. We are going to revisit our first deals as realtors. And if you've bought or sold a property or you're a realtor yourself, you can remember that first deal and how it went for you. So stay tuned to this episode of The Den. The Den, powered by the Lyons Group, a show dedicated to exploring hot topics in real estate, local happenings, and industry trends. We're a small team of professionals approaching $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 local transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Den. Today is going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about our first deals in real estate. And whether you've bought or sold a property, you may, specifically if you bought a property, you remember the first time you went to closing, the first time you closed a deal and the feelings that you had. Well, as a realtor, we have those same feelings, just a little bit different on our first deals. But before we get to that, before we talk about that today, let me introduce my friends, my partners, my co-hosts, the fellow members of the Lyons Group. To my left, Paul, Hammy the Rockberry, Aspen the Ninja, Groen, and the boss, Shannon Martinez. My name is Ben, the Winging It Lyons. I guess I could be the butt dialer, the Winging It. I mean, you could coin me in any number of.
We've got a lot.
There's a lot.
But I think it's only fair I throw in a nickname every once in a while. But today's episode is going to be a fun one because we remember those first deals. I mean, I remember mine. I like that, like it was yesterday, and it was exciting and traumatic all in one. So we're going to revisit that for you today, and hopefully it'll bring back some nostalgia on your end if you've bought a home before. But to kick us off today, why don't we go to Paul and talk about your first deal? And I want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, some of the thoughts and feelings you had, and share with us some insight on your first deal.
I came up with this topic, so this is my fault. And in thinking of it, I thought of the time frame that I was in at the time. I've come out of a bad job, and you guys brought me in and showed me the ropes here. And I do remember really leaning on you guys for guidance and inspiration on this stuff. And, you know, back then, I didn't have the stress I have now. I'll just say that. And now I have to be right all the time. And back then I was just learning, and I could say it's my first deal, and it wasn't that big of a deal. And I listened to a lot of phone calls. And I think one of the things that, I took from it is we can call it puffery, a little bit of puffery. Cause I mean, we have experience. This goes back to that. I mean, how many years experience in this room now? 50 something years experience now, 60, maybe 60, something like that.
That's just with Ben.
That's what I was going to say. When I started, you had 16 years experience. By the time we left American Dream 2 years later, you had 24 years experience. So that was 5 years ago. So
that's called realtor math.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's why your deals don't close.
Hey, that's another.
Sorry. I don't want to take up all our time here. But I'm going to talk about three because in 2017, when I got my license, I closed 3 deals. That was it. And they all closed about the same time.
But in all fairness, you started at the end of the year. It didn't take you a whole year to close 3 deals.
Yeah, don't sugarcoat it for me. It was a bad year. So there was 1 foreclosure and 2 real estate contract duplexes. And I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was writing real estate contracts and trying to deal with foreclosure companies and banks. And it was absolutely mind-boggling that I was doing it. During this process, I was thinking about this time frame. The Aztec school shooting happened while I was on a showing, and that was kind of a freaky time frame because my kids were all in the same school. My wife was a teacher, but there was a lot of, like, nowadays we talk about negotiations and dealing with customers and their emotions and those types of things. At this point, it was just like, I don't even know the paperwork. You know, I don't know if I'm messing up. I don't know if I'm going to be buying a house for you because I've screwed it up so bad. I didn't know what was going to happen. I had family on one deal, which is its own stressor because I had to be extra good.
Yeah, anytime you mix family in a deal, it just makes it tough.
I love you, Martine. Yeah. The other one was a foreclosure. It was a guy that you referred to me, and I helped his dad buy a little double wide, up Northern La Plata. But those were hard deals. I think I mentioned in a previous podcast, I didn't know what financing was for about 6 months into my real estate career. So there's a lot of learning that happened right there.
In all fairness, right? I'm going to be with Shannon here. With all fairness, you understood financing. You just didn't understand the levels of financing that can, the different options, all the different leverage.
No. I'll say this. Remember when I got my first pre-qual letter? I asked you, I said, what's this? I had already closed like 10 deals. I said, what's this? What do I do with this?
Oh my gosh.
She was like, what?
Oh, heavens.
So those deals were hard, just because you're learning through it, and they were actually kind of difficult deals too. They weren't slam dunks. Those came later, but I kind of had to earn my way.
So let's talk about the very first one that you did. Was that the investment property with family?
Yeah.
Okay. So walk us through that.
Oh my God. So he wanted to buy some investment properties. Our broker at the time had some that she had just listed, was having trouble selling. Back then, the market was way different. There's 1,000 listings out there and no buyers. We were all fighting for buyers. So I had family that wanted to get in it, and I negotiated with a very tough negotiator. We love you, Elizabeth. Yeah. And tried to get him the best deals we could. I put no balloon payments in these things. I mean, if I look back at these real estate contracts, I would never, ever put somebody in one of those. But it was hard trying to figure out how to do inspections, how to deal with rents, how to deal with, occupants in there. When you don't know the timeframes, you don't know title work, you don't know anything. They're hard deals.
What estoppel certificates are, things like that. Yeah.
Well, don't.
Yeah. So
don't start that.
Yeah.
I already failed that podcast.
Well, I have to say this: when you finally got to closing, right? Mm-hmm. Were you just amazed? Like, this is all that goes into an actual transaction. I mean, when you finally got there, like, how do transactions close? Because of all the different moving parts and all the things that could have gone wrong. What was your feeling at that point, and how was the buyer's reaction?
Buyer was happy. I mean, we got him what he wanted. My eyes were pretty wide. I was like, how many times do I have to do this a year to make a living? It wasn't. These were back when the checks were a lot smaller, and the desk fees and the splits were a lot different back then. So it took a lot more time. But I remember my eyes being wide and going, "This is." At the beginning, it's, do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
And you have to decide, this is for me. And it got easier.
Yeah.
But the first ones were eye-opening for sure.
Well, I think this is very telling, especially for our viewers, because a lot of viewers, or I should say a lot of people, they just think that we go out and put a sign in the yard and it's HGTV. We're just touring people around. They don't see all the grinding that happens to get a deal done, all the things that go off the rails that you got to put back on the rails. And sometimes it's things that go off the rails aren't fixable. I mean, we just can't get them to come together and get to closing. So all the missed shots before you actually have a closing. And that was your first insight on like, oh my gosh, all the things that happen to get to the closing table, all the conversations, all the things that could go wrong. What a great feeling to finally get to the closing table, especially with family. I mean, family is hard enough as it is, but especially with family. So thank you, Paul, for sharing that. Aspen, let's move on to yours. First deal, give us some background, some context, some insight, and some feelings.
Couldn't be more opposite than Paul. Well, I started at Coldwell Banker. And if anyone knows Alana Crampton, you don't write wrong paperwork. So as soon as I started there, she had me listing my house, parents' house, listing, going through all the paperwork. And then we would submit it to her or some of the people working there. There's a handful of people you could give it to, and they would tell you everything you did wrong. They would basically grade it. And I did that probably more times than they were used to, because I just wanted it to be right. And I came in already having some deals lined up. So I was helping my friend, who is still a really good friend, Megan Craig. She was buying a house, and it was actually Ryan Brown with Remax who was on the other side. And we got it closed in 2 weeks. And I was like, this is easy.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sure Title and Ryan and everybody was probably so annoyed with me. But as soon as we got it under contract, I remember I sat down with Lana and I was like, okay, tell me every step. Who do I need to talk to for these steps? Do I reach out? Who do I reach out to for these? And we wrote it all down. I had my things, and I was like, this isn't going to take a month.
Yeah.
And it didn't.
Yeah.
I'm sure I was annoying everybody.
You are like the person that goes into Vegas and sits down at a blackjack table and just crushes it. And like, what's the problem here? And then you walk away and like, I made $1,000. And then casinos love you because you're coming back, right?
I don't like gambling with real money.
Yeah.
And then my second deal was commercial. So, yeah. And that was like it was all happening kind of at the same time. I had those two going at the same time. And I remember whenever it closed and I got that check, I was like, yes, like in the car. I was like, this is the best money I've ever made. And one of them was a commercial lease. Like I made like $800. Yeah. But I was so excited.
You were flying high. Mm-hmm. So those emotions were high. So at what point did you go, holy cow, the first couple of deals were easy. Now I'm starting to see like what it takes, what it's all involved in closing a transaction. Was that in your third or fourth, or when did the reality hit of?
I don't know. Like obviously there's been hard deals. There's deals that don't stay together. There's deals that have taken months to do. I just don't think like, oh, this is it's
terrible.
I just like doing it. Yeah. I really, really like this job. I like the organization, the structure of it. I like getting something like, it's almost like a puzzle. Like, how do we get it from here to closing? I like figuring out the different things that you have to do. And I don't know, I've just always and I enjoy the paperwork of it too. So I think that's kind of where maybe it was a little bit different. Now the paperwork can be a little bit tedious, but whenever for years, I just love the like clean file of it. So, and I also said from the beginning, I want to be consistent and I want to be ethical. And to me, that means not forcing things together that aren't going to work. Mm-hmm. I've had a deal fall apart over $50 before, and I stand by that because I think those people would have foreclosed on their house. Mm. So even though it was like, it's just $50, I was like, if we're having to all piece together this deal, it's not worth it. So I can't think of any time that I was like, oh my goodness, maybe this job's not for me. From day one, I've loved it. That's
a refreshing look. Oh my gosh. I mean, especially when you lean in, it's like an open loop, closed loop type of thing where, we have these open loops all the time in real estate where we're trying to close them. And when you do that good through a deal, you have a clean deal, like Aspen's saying. I mean, you just open loop, closed loop, all the variables are dialed in, buttoned up. It's clean. You get to the closing table and people are happy. And
I think a lot of people have problems, especially new realtors, with the organization of the files. I could see that being a really hard thing to keep track of. I came from wedding photography and videography where I'm dealing with thousands of files. So I came in already knowing exactly how I was going to organize my files. So from day one, they've been lined up how I wanted. But I could see if you didn't come, because whenever I first started photography, it took me a while to learn how to condense things and keep them in a way where you're not searching for 15 minutes to find one document. So I think that would have been a hard thing to figure out if I didn't already know how I wanted to.
You brought that engineering kind of mindset to real estate, which is really invaluable because you have to, it's like the old PERT and Gantt charts. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but like these things have to happen before this one happens. And then and it's just this big, it's very orderly, but I mean, all these sequence of events have to happen. If you don't have that mindset in real estate, it could get ugly pretty quick.
It could get overwhelming, I think, because there's a lot of documentation, especially in New Mexico. I think that could have been really overwhelming.
Yeah. And so your first client was like, your friend was like, this is amazing.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, now looking back, I'm sure Ryan was like, oh my gosh, chill out, lady. And title, I was chatting with them like all the time. And then we ordered the appraisal right away, inspections negotiated. I was like, this is so easy. And obviously some have been harder.
Yeah, I was made for this.
And even Lana, she brought it up in an office meeting. She's like, I don't know what's going on, but Aspen just closed a deal in 2 weeks. And I was like,
that's it. I love it. Yeah. That's fantastic.
Obviously there's been harder deals since then.
Yeah. But I like the mindset, right? The mindset is, hey, if it's not meant to be, it's not going to come together. And I'm going to be ethical and I'm going to communicate well and promote my client's interest, and the chips fall where they fall. So Paul, you were going to say something on that?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. Okay. We're going to jump from Paul to Shannon. Shannon, tell us about your first deal.
So my first deal was with a friend as well. I had a friend that was wanting to purchase a house, start the process, and knew I was getting my license. And I had been in the business a couple of years anyway, but I hadn't been licensed. And so he was kind of getting his stuff together, working on that. And as soon as I did have my license, we kind of hit the ground running, looking at things. It was nice actually to do your first deal with someone, because I didn't have to put on a front of any sort. It was very transparent. He knew it was my first deal. We were learning it together. Most of the stuff I did have a little bit of an advantage because I had worked in the industry for 3 years before I ever got my license. So I had an idea of what the paperwork was going to look like and how you did things. But I was surprised too at deadlines when it came to you don't know how much time to put in here when you're actually writing it. I had seen these for years, but I didn't really realize what went into
the thought behind it.
Yeah. And I had somebody point out something that was really interesting to me. She said, everything you put in your purchase agreement has a consequence. So it matters. Because I had another broker that said, it's just fill in the blanks. You don't need to worry about it. It's all going to be fine. And I knew that wasn't right. So whenever she said that, it really resonated with me. And I realized every single thing I put in, every single blank that needs to be filled in, there's a consequence to that. And I've got to get that right. So I took it very seriously and I was very stressed out. But I think by the end of it, it was like, okay, now I've seen the back end of it for years. Now I've actually been on the ground because I had really never gone to a closing before was what I did. I had never been to the title company, I dropped off a little paperwork here and there. I never sat down at the closing table with somebody. I didn't really know what all they were looking for. I was overwhelmed at the loan package. I remember that because that was something being in the office as an assistant I had never seen before. So there was a lot of learning. There was a lot of surprises, even though I had seen a lot of it over the years. And I think at the end of it, I felt like, okay, now I've got a handle of the whole process because I had seen so much for so long. And now I've actually gone through of course, every deal is different and you learn more on every single deal.
And theory versus practicality. I mean, you theoretically understand, but then actually practically doing it. And that's what you're saying. You had all these pieces kind of floating around, but to put it together and actually close a deal is a different ballgame.
Yeah. Yeah. And every time you do one, it's going to be a little bit different and you learn a little bit more and you learn different aspects. We didn't tackle everything in the first deal, but it went well. And he was a good friend of mine and he was a good friend at the end, which is really important.
That's important.
And he loved his house and it was a good house for them for a lot of years. And it worked out. It worked out really well. There was no nightmares behind it. It wasn't even really uncomfortable for me because I knew everybody dependent. I knew the lenders. I knew, people at the title company. I knew, the other broker. That made it a little bit easier for me.
Yeah. And how'd you feel when you got into the car after closing that first deal?
Oh, wow. Like Aspen, best thing ever. Like I've got I have got a closing on the books. I've got a paycheck like I've never had before. Cause if you just work an average job, you're used to a 2-week paycheck. Now, mind you, there's a lot more work that goes into our paycheck. So, but it was different. It was completely different getting a commission check than getting a paycheck for hours work, know? And a lot of pride in it. There was a lot of pride in it.
You are directly, you are rewarded with the amount of work that you put into it. In this career.
And I will say, I promptly took that to the bank and then drove down and bought my first new car. I had always had used cars. I bought my first, it was a small car. I didn't go out and buy a Cadillac like every realtor does, which is crazy. They go buy that on their first deal. And you got to think there's a lot of up and downs in this industry. But I knew that I was going to need a nicer vehicle for the job. This was back when we took people around. So that was the first thing I did with my very first commission check I ever got. I drove down and I bought myself a little tiny Hyundai Elantra. It was a small car, but it was new. It was nice. And I could accommodate.
You reinvested in yourself.
I did. That's the first thing I did. I went down and I put money into a car.
What a great feeling.
For my job. Yep.
Yeah.
You keep asking what they felt like after the first closing. I now remember why you're asking me this. As soon as we used to ask for Zillow reviews as we walk out of the title company.
I forgot about this.
My brother-in-law was my first client, my only 4-star review. And it's because it was my first deal. He says, I can't give you got to go up. I was like, this messes me up forever.
How could
the
you?
only 4-star review you ever had.
My first review and my only 4-star review was my brother.
And it was because of the experience. I think it was like the questions were like experience and knowledge and
Yeah, and
whatever else.
everything was
Yeah.
good, like communication, all those points were good. And then experience, he goes, I can't give you that one.
Yeah.
I was like,
He's
come on.
First. Yeah. And he very engineer minded.
And you have earned
Yeah.
5 stars from every customer
yeah.
since that day.
I think
so
we all have it. I don't know if we've.
You can be proud of that.
I think we have never had, barring
Don't
that
do
first
that.
one. Okay.
Don't say it. Don't say it.
It's like that. Okay. Let's just leave. We're going to leave that one alone.
Set
We're
us
going to
up
leave
for
that.
failure there.
Okay. Well, so my first deal, let's talk about that because Shannon, you probably remember this one.
1942.
1942, when we first started, we were carrying books, right? There's only 6 agents. We actually, early 2000s. And I had one of those experiences where it's really hard to be someone that you're not. And so I feel like a lot of people try to be, try to play the role versus just being who you are. And I met up with this couple and they called about a house. And so I went up there and walked into the home and I had never seen this home. And I stumbled into it and kind of stumbled left because the floors were so wonky and the house had settled. I was like, holy cow, look at those floors. And they started laughing. And then we walked into the great room and I looked up and I'm like, oh my gosh, the ceiling had stains all over it. And I'm like, look at that. And not really knowing any different, obviously, I was just being me, right? I found out later that couple, they wanted to use me because the previous realtor that they had worked with, similar situation, but they would not acknowledge anything that was wrong with the home. And I was very much like, man, that needs to be, we need to look at that. If this is something you're interested in, we got to check this out. So I didn't pull any punches. I just was very transparent about my thoughts and what they should see. And to me, that just came really naturally. So they called me and said, yeah, we want to work with you. And I'll never forget, we found this home down the Caminos. And there was a multiple offer situation. And they were on the road. They had offered $120,000. And so I'm going to share this story.
Back when you could buy a house for $120,000. I'm
going to share this story because the statute of limitations, I think, has ended. But anyways, they had made the offer on the property at $120,000. And the other offer was, I think, maybe $1,000 higher or something, $121,000. And the realtor called me and she said, Ben, I need to know if they'll do it for $123,000, you've got the deal. And I was like, let me call them. And I was at the mall at the time. We did the Home Builders Expo at the mall at the time. And I hung up and I called the clients and they were driving back from Albuquerque. Well, there's no service back then in the early 2000s. And so I called the realtor back and I said, they'll take it. And it was terrible. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was bad.
And where was your agency?
Yes, exactly. It was terrible. But I knew them and I knew they wanted the house and they had told me they would pay up to, I think, $125,000 for it. And so I hadn't gotten confirmation with them. So I called them 6 times and then 20 minutes later or so, they called me and they said, oh yeah, we would have, 123 or whatever it ended up being was perfect. It was under what they were wanting to pay. So in that instance, I crossed ethical lines and I'm here to admit it. As a new realtor, I just didn't know what to do. I was total panic, right? Mm-hmm. It all worked out, but I say that to say this, people make mistakes every once in a while. I was thankful that was the mistake I made and it worked out in the favor. And I panicked as a new realtor, but it turned out good. They were thrilled. And I'll never forget when we got to the closing, she was practically jumping up and down crying because we had looked and just hadn't found the right fit. And it was an amazing time, but to try to calm yourself. Any new realtors listening, don't panic. Just let things happen and try not to do anything squirrely.
That's what I was going to say. Whenever you're new, and this is what I tell new realtors, I'm like, there's no emergencies in real estate. If there's an emergency, it's because somebody messed something up or you have time to figure it out. But I remember calling my broker at 11:30 at night and they answered.
Yeah.
And I was like, Now I'm like, what were you doing? Yeah. No one's looking at it tonight. They'll look at it tomorrow. Nothing's happening right now. But when you start, it feels like, oh, I need to do this right now.
Right.
Everything's an emergency.
Right away.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important for new brokers also to know that, it's better to just say, I don't really know what to do here and tell your peers, tell someone you're working with, like what's the next step? Because everybody's in it. Everybody wants the same goal. Everybody's doing the same thing. And most people are going to be, I would rather have a brand new broker come to me and say, this is kind of my first thing and I don't know really how to handle this. And I'm like, that's okay. This is how we should be doing it. As opposed to them feeling like, they're going to hide something or they're going to get a little arrogant because they're embarrassed or, that's not going to get anybody anywhere. Yeah. I mean, just throw it out there.
Yeah.
We're all new. We've all been new.
Yes.
We all had to learn.
I used that so much when I was, first starting out is I'm new, or I wouldn't say I'm new. I don't know. I'll find out and get back with you. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. People appreciate that. They understand it too.
You said that on the phone today.
I did.
55 years into the business.
Yeah, 55 years.
So he's still doing it.
Still saying, I'm not sure, but I'll get back with you. Okay, let's wrap it up here. We're running out of time. Quick speed round. What is the best takeaway from today's stories? Paul, I'll start with you. What's the best takeaway from us sharing the first time stories?
I think when you're brand new, you definitely don't know what to do. Lean on your fellow realtors. And do not do what you did and be an agent when you're not an agent.
Absolutely. And I will second that. Do not do what I did. Aspen?
I'm going to say, don't lose that excitement. Because like you said, yours was like 120,000. Mine was a similar price. I think sometimes we can get so into the next one that we forget to just focus in on these ones and how special they are, no matter the price range and no matter what people are looking at. I think it's good to remember thinking back to those first feelings because it does become a job eventually. And, you still get there every once in a while, you get those clients that really pull at your heartstrings or something's really special, but a lot of them are the same, and you just kind of go through the motions. I think remembering how it felt and how excited you were for them and how they're still feeling that way. We're just, you kind of lose it a little bit. So it's, I just think
that's a
hang
great
on
point.
to that a little bit.
Yeah. Lean into the power of now.
Yeah.
Now is a precious moment. And especially since it's a career for us, we get a little bit calloused. And calloused maybe not be the right word, but numb maybe to the process. But these people are going through it and it's a big deal to them. And it's emotional and it's exciting. So great advice, Shannon.
Yeah, I would say if, your first deal, just lean on your realtor community. Don't be afraid to say that you don't know how to do something or ask them questions or just, do your best to get it right. I mean, we've all been new and it's not there's nothing embarrassing. There's always those things we don't know. Even after years of experience, there's those things we don't know. So,
yeah. Well, there are embarrassing things. It happens every once in a while. It usually happens to me, and that's okay. But I would echo all the sentiments that the big takeaway for me is to go back to enjoying the moment with these buyers and the sellers that we work with, because it is a big moment for them, and it's a process and it's something that should be rewarded and enjoy and savor that moment. Do not do what I did, and that's okay. People learn from mistakes. And that was 40 years ago. So, and those clients came back, they closed 9 deals with me since then. So I must have done something right. But I would say this, every transaction is different. All the people we work with are different. All their needs are different. But we are in this together and we enjoy working with people. And these are great points. So thank you for tuning in today and listening to our first stories for our very first closings in real estate. And hopefully, if you bought before, maybe it brings back some memories for you as well. If you like our content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, go to our Facebook page, like our Facebook page, get on our mailing list. We send out a weekly newsletter. It's got all kinds of great information. And we'd love to hear your feedback and we love your support. So thank you for listening to this episode of The Den. Thank you for listening to The Den, powered by the Lyons Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed on real estate happenings. If you'd like to learn more about the Lyons Group, visit sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lyons Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in The Den.